Prime-time local news, serving the Lakeland and Midwest regions.
Well, hello everyone and welcome to the Agriculture Year in Review. I'm Gerard Lampow, and over the next hour we'll look back at the issues that affected agriculture. Well, the year started with lots of promises. The snowpack melted and producers got into seeding season. The ratification of the revamped TPP gave producers some hope for greater market access, especially in Japan. But later in the year, producers would struggle to get the crop in with a harvest that wouldn't end. The struggle deepened with soft prices, especially for canola, and the uncertainty of the U.S.-China trade war with soybeans being in the crosshairs. So let's revisit 2018, the year in agriculture. In January, with oil prices averaging about $60 US a barrel, there was cautious optimism about the global economy. J.P. Gervais with Farm Credit Canada gave us a look at agriculture's economic picture.
What really matters is demand for the commodities that we sell.
J.P. Gervais is Vice President and Chief Economist with Farm Credit Canada. He says world demand for oil seeds and grain is pretty strong. World supplies are growing, but demand remains robust, so prices are relatively stable. He also thinks the Canadian dollar will stay at a relatively low level.
It's been going up slightly lately, but I do expect that the rate or the exchange rate to come down maybe underneath 80 cents on average for 2018. And that's still going to contribute to actually raise the demand for Canadian commodities.
On the supply side, we will have to wait to see how the weather impacts production. Gervais feels even an average crop production year will put producers in good standing. On the livestock side, there's been growth in U.S. supplies, especially in cattle, poultry and hogs. Here again, his focus is on the strength of domestic demand in Canada.
We've seen retail prices come down slightly. Not as much as perhaps everybody would have liked, but we've seen competitive pressures at the retail level actually play out in support of demand for red meat, among other things, and as well as even on the dairy side.
With strong domestic demand, he says hog margins could be above the 5-year average, but things could be tighter for cattle. For Saskatchewan, a specific concern is the impact of India's tariff on chickpeas, since the Asian giant is Canada's largest pulse consumer.
At the end of the day, it gives one less option to Canadian producers. So whereas demand for oilseeds and grains remain relatively strong, the fact that some of the acres that we would normally see, or that we've seen in the past few years go to the pulses, we'll likely see these acres go into canola and wheat.
So an increase in canola production could also put pressure on prices. Gervais sees this as an area to monitor. There's also concern for NAFTA and TPP negotiations. With NAFTA hanging on the ropes, the hope remains for a TPP minus the U.S. There's also the European market.
It's going to take a little bit of time for Canadian businesses and producers to see the benefits of this deal for many different reasons. There are standards that Canadian exporters need to meet and before they actually get to start exporting to Europe. But obviously to be opening up a market as big as Europe at a time where we're not even sure the status of our access to the U.S., actually I think it's a pretty good thing.
Gervais thinks it will take a little more time to fully leverage the benefits of access to Europe. Meantime, eyes on the Bank of Canada as to whether interest rates will go up again on January 17th. At the end of the day, ag producers' resilience is what we'll see through 2018, and producers need to look at their balance sheet.
That if something happens, any type of downturn in the ag economy, we know that the first line of defense is working capital.
And of course, interest rates went up again on January 17th, and we're still getting accustomed to the new look NAFTA. Well, let's push on as Canada is agreeing with its Asian counterparts to sign off on the new look Trans-Pacific Partnership. The deal was in jeopardy when the Americans walked away from the Group of 12. Now that Canada has a shoe-in, there's excitement in ag circles.
It basically lowers all the import tariffs, and it should be fantastic in terms of spurring on more trade, especially with the amount of Canadian cattle that are exported.
Lee Creech is based in Denver, but his home ranch is MC Quantock Livestock just north of Lloydminster. He was one of the participants at this week's Cow-Calfonomics who heard market analyst Ann Wasco break the news about the revamped TPP.
As time goes forward, then all 11 countries in TPP will see tariff rates drop down to, as far as beef's concerned, get down towards 9%.
In 2016, Canada sold $115 million in beef to Japan. For 2017, even though final numbers are not yet in, there was a 28% increase in Canadian beef exports going to Japan, making the Asian jewel our #2 market after the United States. With TPP, the increase in beef over time is pegged at over $200 million. With the 38.5% tariff on the way out, Canadian cattlemen are breathing easier.
For Canadian producers, we'll have access, preferential access to the Japanese market, and that's access that our competitors in Australia already have. So we will regain our competitive balance with Australia, and we will gain a competitive advantage over our counterparts selling U.S. beef into the Japanese market, because they will remain at a higher tariff level.
A possible signing seems set for March, and Maswal is hopeful, if the agreement can go through Parliament this year, that TPP could be in place by 2019. In terms of dealing with cultural and other issues that may be of concern to Canadians, Maswal thinks the government has found a way to handle it.
I think there was a very real debate that was going on within Ottawa about things that they knew was beneficial for Canada in the agreement, but there were some changes that Canada was seeking in terms of cultural protection.
Issues like intellectual property and origin of content were also sticking points, and as well value-added sectors that rely on agriculture, like food and beverage manufacturers, can all press the reset button. Kitscoty producer Gord King is excited for TPP and is eyeing the increasing demand for beef here at home and abroad.
Like Walmart now has jumped aboard. They want Canadian beef. They've jumped aboard with the Angus. McDonald's, they want the Canadian beef. They jumped on board with it.
And on October 25th, Canada's Senate ratified the deal, making us the 5th country to sign on to the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP. That is a mouthful. The agreement comes into force 60 days after 6 of the 11 signatories have ratified the deal. And just a note for you planning AgriVision's 2019 market analyst Ann Wasco, we saw in that story, she will be in Lloydminster for this year's coming AgriVisions. Well, on to our next story. Sustainable land practices are the backbone of farm management, and there's funding available to secure the spaces that produce our food.
They came to us and asked if we needed help, and we did. Our riparian areas were very, very poor, and we had no financing to address that.
One aspect of this work is that landowners get paid for wetland restoration. So if you've got a wetland that's been drained, damaged, or altered, you can get in touch with the Vermilion River Watershed Alliance.
In terms of applying, they can either go online. Our website is vrwa.ca, and they can download both the application guide, which provides information about the program, as well as an application. And applications are due March 15th.
Mara Erickson has a background in wildlife ecology. She has transitioned to watershed management in the last 2 years.
The applications will go to a selection committee, and they'll look over them and examine them for feasibility and eligibility. We want to have projects selected pretty quickly, within a month or month and a half, and get that application approval out to the landowner by early May.
Tim Axe is an organic producer in Clandonald. He practices regenerative farming, where over time his operation is rebuilding topsoil and allowing the biodiversity of the land to sustainably support his livestock and vegetation. The program gave him over 4,000 trees for riparian areas, as well as over 2 miles of fencing. Riparian areas allow filtration of the water and acts as a buffer zone.
80% of all wildlife spends at least all or part of its life in a riparian area. And there's only close to 4% of the landmass in Alberta that has riparians in it.
And when we come back, we find out why beef's water footprint is down. Do stay with us. You know, it's a changing landscape when we are discussing how much water it takes to put beef on your plate. I find out that beef's water footprint is down compared to 30 years ago.
And the water footprint is one that it personally affects consumers.
Sherry Copperthorne Barnes ranches with her family west of Calgary. Research from Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada and the University of Manitoba is showing that it takes 17% less water to produce a kilo of beef as of 2011 compared to 30 years before. Dr. Tim McAllister with Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada in Lethbridge led the study. His team had to define cattle production systems across Canada, like the differences between a feed in the east as opposed to the west. They estimated the type of feed and the amount needed to meet nutritional requirements and the crop area needed to produce that feed across the country.
We were able to estimate the amount of water that was required for production of the feed, the amount that was consumed by drinking by the animal itself, as well as the amount of water that was required for the processing of the meat into final products.
Once they factored that in, they compared data for water use for beef production in 1981 to 2011. Water use was divided into two categories. He says blue water is either from irrigation or water that's pumped from a well and then applied to crops.
Green water includes the water that's also just associated with rainfall. So when we look at those combined, we find about a 17% reduction in the amount of water that's required to produce a kilogram of beef in 2011 versus 1981. And if we calculate that just on the basis of the blue water, it's about a 20% improvement.
The reasons for the reduction in the amount of water include more efficient water distribution systems to cattle in 2011 versus 1981. Also, 99% of water now goes to feed production. Only 1% of the water is consumed by the animal, but the big reason is increased carcass size or meat from each animal.
And so if you produce more meat from a single animal, then the maintenance requirements associated with the production of that meat is lower. And so that's a major reason why it took less water to produce the same amount of meat in 2011 than in 1981.
So with a smaller water footprint, you could say that beef is not making as big of a splash as 30 years ago.
Hope you like that pun there. Well, another crowd puller at AgriVisions is the conversation on where cattle prices are heading. I get some insight from someone who has weathered the challenges of the last decade.
In the last 2 to 3, well, starting 2014, 2013, 14, 15 is, those were great years for the cow-calf sector.
Brian Periak comes from a ranching family. He has a master's in agriculture economics and has been at Canfax for 8 years. He lived through the BSE crisis and says anyone who has stuck it out deserves these good years. But from the heady days of $2 to $3 a calf, the market cooled in 2016 to about $1.65 for a steer. But it's back up again, suggesting a roller coaster ride.
And today we're back over $2 a pound, which, is still relatively strong prices. And right now, most of the sectors are pretty profitable.
The trigger for the roller coaster has been drought in the States, but U.S. beef stocks are recovering even as Canadian supply remains relatively constant. Robust demand explains why consumers have not seen a meaningful change in the price of beef at the grocery.
I actually just did a comparison comparing 2012 retail prices and fed steer prices in Alberta to 2017. You compare the 2012 price to 2017 prices, steer prices are 38% higher in 2017 than they were in 2012, whereas retail beef prices are actually 33% higher than they were in 2012.
Overall, steer prices are up and retail beef is also up, but not moving as fast as steers. Perrier reflects that the cattle sector is coming out of a decade of challenge from BSE and drought, and pasture has also been given up to grain, especially canola. So where are prices heading?
I think our prices, for the most part, that low we hit in 16 should stand as a low for a little while. And hopefully I'm looking at, kind of the same scenario, that $2 calf range, give or take a little bit.
The question of trade is still on producers' minds, especially the U.S. market and NAFTA.
Even if NAFTA, worst case scenario, and falls right apart, product can still move. Yes, we will have to pay some tariffs on cattle and beef. They're not going to be huge tariffs. It will cut into our market a little bit, but it's not going to stop trade.
Well, she's a lifelong champion of animal handling systems. An early setback in life did not deter her from finding her passion. I had the chance to sit down with Dr. Temple Grandin.
Well, there's two pioneers of the low-stress handling. They're Bud Williams and Dylan Biggs. And he's done some amazing things. I've heard about him getting the bull to go into the trailer with no handling facility.
Dr. Temple Grandin says the research shows that stockmanship and gentle handling of animals will give you more productive animals. She describes herself as a visual thinker and teaches her students to be observant.
If the bull even looked at the trailer, he backed off out of the flight zone. In other words, you reward the animal for even doing the smallest behavior that you want. So if you want to teach a steer to lead, he even leans forward, let up on the lead rope.
The world needs all kinds of minds. Diagnosed with autism at the age of 2, that has not stopped Temple Grandin from becoming a leading voice for livestock behavior and handling, including the design of livestock facilities.
When I first started in the early 70s, cattle handling was absolutely atrocious. Electric prods on every single animal. And I'm really pleased to say handling has improved. I've done a tremendous amount of work at the meatpacking plants.
Grandin says the U.S. Cattle Association has also been putting greater emphasis on beef quality assurance. She adds, in handling cattle, you need to calm down.
Screaming at cattle has intent. They know you are screaming at them, where just miscellaneous machinery noise does not have intent.
Grandin has developed numerous resources and design handling facilities which can be found on her website. Producers across the Lakeland region came away with a wealth of information.
Temple Grandin basically will help improve the way you maneuver your livestock to reduce the stress on both you and your animals.
Dr. Temple Grandin there. Well, when we come back, a grain terminal is on the way just east of the border city. Do stay with us. We're looking back at the year in agriculture. An iconic prairie image is set to change the skyline just east of Lloydminster, and a global player is readying shovels to hit the ground.
It's an open house, and area producers in Eldon and Maidstone are excited at the prospect of a grain facility coming to the area.
It means a whole bunch to have a facility this close to home after hauling 25-30 miles for several years.
Officials are very pleased with the significance of this development to the region.
It's very important with some of our community. We sort of got a little hit on the oil, but this means a lot to our local farmers and farmers a little bit further away, and what G3 is going to bring it, and welcoming G3 to our community. They're just adding more value to our community.
At a cost of over $40 million, G3 Canada is already doing the groundwork and aiming to have a modern 42,000-ton grain facility with a loop track ready for harvest 2019.
Well, for the town itself, just the activity, the people around, it's going to support the local businesses that are already here. That's great for them. For the RM, all our producers, grain producers out there, they've got another option to haul their grain.
Area producers like Cal Donald, who live just a skip and a hop from the new elevator, are also reveling in the economic spin-offs.
It's going to give a lot of local people jobs if they wish.
Well, the excitement of spring, well, it was soured for some residents of the Lakelands. I went out to Two Hills to assess a stench that's blowing in the wind, and mind you, some of the images in this story may be difficult for viewers.
Spring melt is well underway across the region, but for residents in Two Hills, it's coming with an extra cost.
Everything started to back up, and a number of culverts got washed out, and a number of creeks overfilled, and everything started to pour into the main tributaries.
Benz Lake and Watts Lake suffered a lot of damage. Goliaths estimates damages in the county between $500,000 to $600,000, but then there's the concern of manure which was in the field.
We had some concerns. There was some manure being put into the field there for spreading. It's a normal procedure. Okay, it's been done in years, but because of the water levels, all of a sudden some of this water came up to the manure and started washing it down and across the road.
We're just a couple of miles west of the town of Two Hills, down Airport Road and Range Road 135. Now, what you're looking at here is about 8 to 10 rows of cow manure. Now, concerned residents alerted Newcap News to this situation, particularly as the spring melt kicked in there and the water that's behind me began to flow over this road and into the adjacent field. The adjacent field leads to the Vermilion River. The Vermilion River flows to the town of Vermilion and eventually to Lloydminster.
We have our Ag Service Board working on it. They've been monitoring it, and they've been one of the ones that had put up the flag and said that there is a concern. And now we just have to do water testing and see how we can mitigate anything, any more damage.
The situation is an environmental concern to the county and the province. Goliaths says the trouble now is to move the manure given the water level. Also, the area is prone to flooding.
I'd have to agree it is somewhat of a floodplain, but over normal circumstances, they'd probably be like you have to be so many feet away from the flowing water area.
The Natural Resources Conservation Board in an email reveals they have received 5 complaints. When water levels recede, the NRCB will investigate whether proper setbacks were followed when the manure was first placed and follow up with the operator to revise his manure storage plan when the investigation is completed. The operator did not return our calls.
Well, the aftermath of that story, the Natural Resources Conservation Board, in an email to our newsroom, indicated that the feedlot operator intends to incorporate or spread the manure into the field and is committed to not storing manure in the affected fields in that manner in the future. Still to come, youngsters show off their bug hunting skills on the farm. Do stay with us. Another 4-H project that's gaining traction with young hunters is the Gun Project. I went out to get a lesson on the gun range.
And that way the hammer is never on the live round.
While I did not hit the target, these 4-H kids are learning how to shoot and, more importantly, the safety and responsibilities of handling a weapon.
Okay guys, what are the 3 main rules of gun safety? First,
never point a gun at anyone.
Second,
never let anyone point a gun at you.
And third,
always leave the action up and open when not firing a gun.
17-year-old Derek Hrachek is the president of the Vermilion River Outdoor 4-H Club. Before every session, he leads his team in saying the safety rules. Only then can practice begin. Another young hunter is 13-year-old Colt Jackson.
Right underneath it.
Okay. When we come here, we always have to be wearing goggles or glasses and earplugs so that the gun doesn't hurt our ears. And we also need to consider to not point the guns at anyone or always stop people if they're pointing the guns at us.
As much as I tried to hit the target, well, I got an even better understanding of safety. John Betts has been helping out with the 4-Hers since 2006.
There's flags here that you have to change. Red flag is the range is hot. Green flag means it's safe to go downrange, which means everybody at the firing line has cleared their guns.
A specialty event is cowboy shooting.
We have 2 pistols, a rifle, and a shotgun. We keep the 2 pistols in our holsters because we dress up like cowboys. And then they've got the rifle and the shotgun on a table. And there'll be a certain pattern that we have to shoot the targets in.
Well, as the school year was wrapping up, some area kids got a chance to visit the farm and do some scouting.
You get to choose whether you want to plant wheat, peas, or canola.
Ag producer Keith Fournier opened his family farm to the classroom as grade 3s and 4s from Jack Kemp got a front row seat to explore our food story.
I'm having a little bit of fun, but it's not too fun. I haven't caught any bugs yet.
These kids are on the hunt for the bugs that affect the crops.
So if you find some worms, like caterpillars, like tent caterpillars or anything, that's really good. Try putting them inside here.
Agronomist Clint Yerke was the resident bug guy as the kids scouted the canola fields.
I got a blue dragonfly.
A blue dragonfly?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's... Is a dragonfly a good bug or a bad bug?
A good bug.
Why are they good?
Eat mosquitoes.
They eat mosquitoes. Very good. Okay, Ethan, what did you catch?
I caught a fly and a flea beetle.
Yerke says canola producers are facing a lot of pressure this season from the baby canola threat.
The flea beetles are actually a little worse this year than what we've seen in previous years, and it's probably has to do with our winter and just the number of canola crops that we have around for them to be munching on.
Yerke wants the kids to have an understanding of how bugs, the good ones like the pollinators and as well the bad ones that attack the crops, fit into the ecosystem.
And I found this real cool insect that it looked like it had 4 legs on the one side, 2 on the other side.
We have a pollinator here. This is a solitary bee species, so it's one of our good bugs to have.
All this adds to their study of plants and soils.
So in our curriculum, we go through and we learn about plants and soils, and so it's really great for them to be able to have this hands-on experience, great opportunity set through agriculture in the classroom and Keith, obviously, and they get to see where their food comes from.
With the growing season well on the way and producers out spraying, the hunt for bugs continues.
Oh, that's a big ant.
They have this segment still to come. There's been a big change in the antibiotic protocol. The Ag Year in Review continues after this break. We're looking back at 2018, the year in agriculture. Having the Autosteer running the combine is something that's taken for granted, so why design one yourself? I had the chance to meet up with an area producer who's not only done that, but is being recognized for his work.
We just used it for harrowing and rolling this spring, like to flatten out the land.
No, it's not a ghost driving the tractor. This is a GPS auto-steering system designed by Manville farmer Brian Tischler.
I put the information on the internet on forums, and people all over the world started asking, well, what about Autosteer? What about Auto Headland? What about some of these other features that other GPS have? And I'm like, impossible. But then we just started breaking them down one by one, and with help and information and other people testing all over the world, I was able to add more and more features to where today we have a fully autonomous tractor.
There are people from several European countries who are sharing in this Manville, Alberta project. Tischler says his tractor has 9 computers on board and the sensor in front, but there are challenges, like when it starts to rain.
I couldn't turn as fast on the headland because now it was muddy, but the computer didn't know that it had rained. Me as an operator knew that I couldn't take it as fast, so then I slowed down. But had the computer just been driving it by itself, it would have crashed into the trees.
Whether or not the future of agriculture lies in autonomous vehicles, the question remains as to what level of autonomy can farmers feel comfortable with, still at a cost of some $15,000 to $20,000 on a $500,000 tractor. Compare that to Brian Tischler's $500 do-it-yourself GPS.
We can go from a tractor that just steers itself in a straight line to one that also turns around at the end of the field and comes back. And maybe you have to control it to do around a gas well or around a patch of trees. But then you can take that another step where it will do all of those spots, completely do the field, and then come back and park in the garage. That is a long way off.
Tischler has sparked a global conversation by using the open source concept to handle proprietary rights. He's on a short list for an award this fall from Alberta Science and Technology.
I got an email from the Aztec Committee, and it said it was the finalist for the Aztec Award in October. And it was PhD so-and-so, MD/PhD so-and-so, and it was like MD, PhD, PhD, and then it was farmer from Manville.
And the farmer from Manville, Brian Tischler, would go on to win this year's Ag Award for Innovation from the Alberta Science and Technology Foundation. Producers across Canada are getting prepped for a change in how they get antibiotics for livestock. Here's an update from a local vet.
Antibiotics used to be available what we'd call over the counter, so you could go to basically anywhere, UFA, Co-op, PV Mart, and buy tetracyclines and also penicillin antibiotics. But actually come December 1st, 2018, the Government of Canada has made a change to that, and they'll only be available through your veterinarians.
As this change rolls out, Dr. Trent Winnecamp with the Lloydminster Animal Hospital says veterinarian oversight and the relationship with your vet is what is being stressed.
Mainly just so that you're not using them incorrectly, right? So that they're being used to treat the condition that they're meant to treat, that they're not being overused.
The change has been in the works for over a year. For consumers, there's always the concern about antibiotics getting into the food we eat.
All antibiotics have what we call a withdrawal date, so when they're used, the animal that has been given that antibiotic can't be slaughtered for a certain amount of time and put into the food chain. So one thing you often hear is, like certain foods are antibiotic free, or the no antibiotics have been used, which is true, but actually all the food we eat is free of antibiotics.
Dr. Winnecamp stresses there's tremendous oversight and meat is tested before going to the consumer. The new antibiotic protocol takes effect December 1st and will further develop the relationship between vets and producers.
In many cases, it won't be that much of a change. Many people already have that relationship with their veterinarian, and all it will involve is just, having a conversation with them about what you're using it for and how you're using it. And so for many people, it won't be much of a change at all. But if you're someone that doesn't have that relationship with your veterinarian, you're going to have to establish that in order to obtain those antibiotics.
Well, earlier this year, when Dr. Temple Grandin visited Alberta, she spoke highly of a rancher from Hannah. I caught up with the cattle whisperer.
Temple Grandin has done gain studies too.
Dylan Biggs has been around cattle all his life. In 1989, he met Bud Williams, and that changed his approach to stockmanship.
Replacing sort of that force and fear approach to working cattle with just an awareness of how you can get these cattle to do what you'd like them to do just by using your position and your movement strategically.
When he's not on the ranch, he's sharing his knowledge with other producers.
We would like them to go straight where we want, and if we get in behind and push them in the direction we want to go, a lot of time that's counterproductive and ends up making them turn the wrong direction. And so once you have movement going, it's important that you're out to the side far enough that they can see where you are and keep going straight without having to turn to look for you.
There's a trick when it comes to turning cattle.
It's important to be up high enough on the head, find that spot where you can get them stopped, and then press into the side of the head to turn them, as opposed to pinching in from the back and getting them to hook around you.
Biggs says there's an economic cost when you stress cattle.
If we just approach it as a cost that we're prepared to accept, it ends up, with a lot of things that cost the industry, all the way from bruising to stress that results in a lot of extra shrink on cattle, so reduced sale weight on cattle. And if the cattle are stressed for too long, of course, then their immune systems get suppressed too.
It's no point taking sick cows to market. He uses a hockey reference to drive his point home.
A good defenseman won't let the offensive or wingman by them by virtue of being able to back up and give ground and hold their position. And that's something typically that we're not taught to do.
And when we come back, we have a look at the late harvest and tight feed supplies. Do stay with us. Thank you for staying with us as we look back at 2018, the year in agriculture. It'll be up to the harvest that almost didn't happen, as ag groups like Team Alberta, they were estimating provincial losses at over $3 billion as Harvest 18 was hanging in the balance. We got a look at the numbers.
It's being described as the non-harvest of 2018. The major crops across Alberta are sitting in the field, in some cases covered in snow, too wet to combine and behind the 5-year average. As of October 9th, 46.7% has been combined. That means Alberta is 35.6% off the 5-year average of 82.3% on major crops.
The quality of the crops that's in the bin has been reported as good.
Susanna Sangster with Agriculture Financial Services puts a positive spin on the numbers, even as the cost of aeration and quality degradation are outstanding.
Canola acres are estimated to be 26% combined and 52% swathed. Spring wheat acres are estimated to be 56.7% combined and 9.6% swathed. And barley acres are estimated to be 52.5% combined and 15.9% swathed.
AFSC feels there's about 7.8 million acres across Alberta waiting to be harvested. Lloydminster is in the central region. All crops are at 43.7%. The 5-year average is 82.1%, so our area is 38.4% behind the 5-year average. For the Lakelands, which is in the northeast region, the average is 43.5%. The 5-year average is 79.4%, so northeast Alberta is 35.9% off of the 5-year average. Southern Alberta is 19.9%, Northwest is 38.5%, the Peace region is 55.6%. So in Alberta on major crops, the 5-year average is 82.3%, so with 46.7% completed, Alberta is 35.6% behind on major crops for the 5-year average. The quality of what's in the bin is the only saving grace.
So wheat estimates are 80% of what's been harvested are reported to be in the top 2 grades. Barley is 85% of what is harvested is estimated to be malt or 1CW. And peas, 90% of what's been harvested is grading a 1 or a 2. And over 75% of bin canola is grading a 1.
AFSC will have to receive and review clients' harvest reports. Those reports are not due before November 15th, so a final dollar value may not be available before December.
Trying to estimate the potential amount of crop insurance claims at this time would be speculative. There are many factors, including the different levels of elected coverage, crop yields, crop quality, and the number of potential unharvested acres that contribute to what the final indemnities will be.
Well, that late season rally finally came in November, but certainly crop quality will be impacted, and so too is feed quality. Here are some tips for cattle producers facing short feed supplies.
Managing cows through the winter is a tough ask, especially when producers are looking forward to calves in the spring. When feed is tight, maintaining body score becomes even more critical. Reynold Bergen with the Beef Cattle Research Council is helping producers with their winter feeding programs.
Find out what you've got available. The second step is to test it, and the third is to work with a nutritionist to match your feeds together so that the animal requirements are met, and at the same time that nutritionist can help you identify where there's gaps.
Covering those gaps will meet energy needs, protein, minerals, and vitamins that may need to be added, and you also need to know at what stage of winter or spring those supplements will be needed.
What are your most cost-effective supplement options that are around? When do you need to supplement? Which animals do you need to feed them to, right? So if you've got a big variation in feed quality, reserve the best quality hay for the thinner and older and younger animals that need the best groceries.
Bergen says the middle cows can get by on the usual tougher diet, but producers need to feed test, especially on byproducts and feed-grade products.
The really cool thing about cows is that they can eat just about anything and turn it into groceries. But when you're feeding something unusual, you need to make sure that they're getting the nutrients they need, but not getting anti-nutritional things that may harm feed quality or may pose a health risk to the animals, right?
That could be excessive sulfur in canola. Bergen says the cheapest feed does not make for the least expensive ration.
Just feeding the cheapest stuff can be way more costly over the long term, especially if that means that you're going to end up with thin cows, because those thin cows are going to rebreed later next year. They're probably going to have more calving difficulties first, and if they rebreed later next year or don't rebreed at all, that's going to have definite implications on your bottom line the year after next.
With snow on the ground, Alberta Canola was touring the province, sharing vital information with producers. I caught up with the tour as it rolled through our region.
Scientific information versus not, etc. like that.
Choosing a better variety that is suited for that particular race of the blackleg fungus. You can pick out the right resistance genes that you need to have in your canola varieties that will fight off the disease and keep the yield there.
Agronomist Clint Yerke weighing in on one of the many challenges facing producers. Another big one as the PMRA reviews seed treatments and the possible loss of agronomic tools is the ongoing glyphosate debate.
Our regulatory bodies here in Canada, the regulatory bodies in the US, they've all found no link between cancer and glyphosate. As you mentioned, it's the most extensively studied chemistry, probably in the history of the world.
Mark Walker with CCGA echoes the sentiment of producers that losing access to existing tools will not allow farmers to feed the world. The focus switched to markets as canola has been falling over the last little while.
Harvest pressure is what's caused canola to move lower here, but also overhanging over the market is soybean ending stocks in the U.S. 955 million bushels is what USDA had suggested last week.
David Drozd with the Winnipeg-based Ag Chief says more pressure on oil seeds could come next year when the South American soybean crop is available and if the China-US trade battle is not resolved. The audience had a lot to digest.
I hope that we continue to push the science behind it and not the rhetoric. What's happened down in the United States isn't totally science-based.
Given the changes that have come from the CRA, a conversation on tax tips and traps was also on the menu.
It's not just tax, it's legal, banking, life insurance, all of those. And it may be different advisors, or it should be different advisors that use for each one of those areas to make sure that you're getting a well-rounded approach.
Stakeholders will be digesting this information for some time as Alberta Canola continues its Powering Profits tour.
There was so much diversity from all of the experts. It was so great to join. It's something I hope I can use back home at my farm as well as at work at the credit union.
As temperatures get colder, it's tough to say let's get outdoors and have some winter fun. I met some kids who are not only doing that, but learning some important skills too.
4-H is awesome!
For many rural communities, a good way to keep kids engaged is through the 4-H program. 12-year-old Maya Weber has been in 4-H for 5 years.
I'll get some more grass there.
As simple as this project looks, they are removing dead, dry, and possible combustible material from their area.
We are building sculptures out of snow and twigs and other stuff like that.
And what are you building over here?
We built like a barn with a house and a fence here and a feeder with a cow in it.
This is only our second project that we've done. We've had a couple of book meetings, but the first one that we did, we went fishing. My husband actually has a boat, and so we took all the kids on the boat, went fishing.
The Hunt family are invested in the 4-H club, and it makes a big difference in the lives of these kids. Spencer Lang is now in his second year.
It teaches us things about don't break down the new trees and trees that are still alive. And also about things like we went fishing earlier in the year, and then we learned about some fishing safety.
Even that simple fishing trip has important lessons to learn. The 4-H programs run from September to May and wrap up with public speaking and an achievement day. It's hard not to get involved in these activities.
Well, it's time now to talk about the future, and if you ask Generation Next, they'll tell you the future is now. I find out how some 4-Hers are building their skills as they show off their animals.
Seeing youngsters winning accolades for their ag achievements is well balanced with a look at all the hard work leading up to lifting the trophy. 11-year-old Madison Goodfellow says her cow Specky weighs about 1,500 pounds. Specky has already had her first calf.
Yeah, she got second overall in her cow calf. 4-H is really fun. You can do a bunch of different activities.
.4-H kids represented themselves well at this year's Stockade in Lloydminster.
4-H, it's awesome. You get to do all sorts of stuff, not just showing cattle, but riding your horse, doing arts and crafts, cooking. It teaches you so much.
12-year-old Ramsey Fleesick has been in 4-H since he was 7 years old. He's also into hunting and hockey.
St. Louis Blues.
Really? Teddy Bear's his calf, his heifer is Omega, and his cow is Show Off.
Getting them ready is most of it. Using the sprays, getting their hair combed up, getting them looking full.
Ramsey got first with his 2-year-old cow and reserve champ overall with his cow-calf pair. These kids are keen on their winning ways.
I won lots with her, and then I thought maybe I could win some more here, too.
12-year-old McKenna has been in 4-H since she was 7. She brought her 2-year-old cow to the show and finished second in her class. All of these kids intend to make a future in agriculture.
Showing cattle.
Showing cattle. The scourge of rural crime is having one upside. Let's find out how communities are coming together.
The crime wave we've talked about out in this area, we've been hit quite a bit with theft along with a lot of the neighbors.
Apart from trying to produce food, rural Albertans have struggled with criminals visiting their property. God George says the Marwayne area has been rallying.
We had a set of individuals in our yard at about 4 in the morning one day, and we had a group chat, and the first truck was there 5 minutes after I called for help. And we never caught those ones. And then just last week, good friends down the road, we actually caught 6 of them.
The community has been taking responsibility to look out for each other.
With the group chat and just being neighbors helping neighbors. And I think we're starting to stick together. Everyone's kind of had it out here. It's been enough. It's not really the RCMP's fault. They're really understaffed. I feel for those people when they come out. You know, the best they can get there is, 20, 30 minutes before they're even on your doorstep, right? People are mad at the cops, but I don't think it's their fault. They're doing a good job.
The police remain vigilant, and even with the harvest rush on, George admits to being pulled over in the early hours of the morning. It helps to know your officers.
Well, we've had meetings. We're working with the police officers. It's pretty sad that we know the officers personally and by name.
If anything, he points out that neighbors and communities need to support each other.
Everyone's just got to stick together, get to know your cops, get to know the legal system, what the rules are.
Well, that's a look back at 2018 in the year in agriculture. I'm Gerard Lampau. All the best for the year coming.